Daniel Wallach, Conduct Detrimental to Podcast, which he worked into the to the last answer. And if I'm not mistaken, you also said Commandos. And I appreciate that if I influence that, because I will not call them by that ridiculous name, especially while Daniel Snyder is the owner of that team. They will always be the Commandos to me.
That name history well. That name is gone by 2025. Oh, what a horrible name. I think whenever Bezos, or if it's Bezos in particular, they're going to just basically whitewash and eliminate anything that had to do with Dan Snyder, up through and including the awful name of that team. That is such a blasé, vanilla name. Yep. It's going to be gone. It may take 2 years because of NFL requirements to change team name, but I think that's going to go.
Just go back to Washington football team. It was different. It was beautiful. All right, one more thing, and this is more about the way the National Football League has protected Daniel Snyder here, because there was supposed to be a written report of the sexual misconduct investigation that ultimately became just an oral briefing to the commissioner, who then a $10 million fine, which Daniel Snyder can either borrow from Bank of America or pull out of a sock drawer in his house. And then they turned the team over to Snyder's wife, which isn't really any different. So there was no penalty given to Washington for repeated, long-standing sexual misconduct. And the NFL was complicit in kind of whitewashing that. What did bother the NFL was the bookkeeping, which hid monies that Washington should have submitted or should have been going to the league's total revenue, football revenue, which impacts other teams' revenues as well. How does the NFL get out of this particular issue without bringing that other one back?
Well, it really shows you where their priorities lie. But, I think everything is going to be sort of, washed away when Dan Snyder is forced to sell the team or does sell the team. I think the page is turned, and when there's a new owner, if Jeff Bezos comes and buys the team or someone else does, I think that will overshadow any of the league's mishandlings of the sexual harassment, sexual allegations. I mean, to this day, we're not even talking about what they did to Colin Kaepernick. The league, is almost like the Teflon League.
Yeah.
And, the business of the NFL marches on. And most fans, for better or worse, and it may be an indictment about the fans, they don't really care so much about the brand as much as the media does. They care about their teams. Mm-hmm. They care about the game that's on the field. And I think the league survives this. Roger Goodell might not survive it because there could be, more reporting on this issue. It really does point, it's not to the league protecting Dan Snyder, but Roger Goodell protecting him. I mean, Jim Perce was complaining months ago that he was kept in the dark.
Yeah.
It's not as if the owners all voted and joined hands and said, we're going to protect Dan Snyder. Roger Goodell may take his marching orders from the other NFL owners, but I think Roger Goodell has the most explaining to do here, because he's in the position of shielding Dan Snyder, signing off on these, approving, sort of the loan structure. Roger Goodell is at the head of the triangle here. It really doesn't fall to the other 32 owners unless they take no action. If they allow this inaction to persist going into month 5 and month 6, and nobody has referred charges to the league and said we should put Dan Snyder on trial, then it falls on each one of the 32 owners, because Jim Irsay talked a big game, 3 or 4 months ago, and he never followed through on it. Mark Davis, of all the owners, should have an axe to grind with Dan Snyder, because Dan Snyder allegedly was the source behind the leaks to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, which led to the firing of John Gruden. So why aren't Irsay or Mark Davis stepping up? Because under the league bylaws and constitution, it only takes one owner to file charges, and then that requires a league investigation and a mini trial before the other 32 owners. You need 24 to convict. Right. You only need one to bring the charges and start the process. So if these owners do nothing, then you could blame them. But it's been time enough already. We're now entering the 5th month after the Bank of America involvement in this auction process, and we're no closer to a sale today. And I think March 26th is the point of no return. I think that's where you might see some rumbling or some action being initiated against Dan Snyder, because it really leaves one of the flagship franchises of the NFL in basically in a state of abeyance, in a state of flux, and that's harmful to the National Football League to have a team like this operating basically under a receivership, because it's really no more than a receivership. It's in a state of temporary status without any future or any semblance of belief or confidence that this is a competitive franchise. And until he's out of there, there's no stadium deal.
That's right.
There's no professionally run franchise. And there are questions as to whether there's more malfeasance going on behind the scenes. As long as Dan and Tanya Snyder remain in charge, I think it's a question as to whether anybody would ever want to be a limited partner of Dan Snyder or buy the team without full transparency of what's going on in the books and records. Because what's been revealed in this ESPN report by Don Van Natta chronicles, like years of basically having 2 sets of books, cooking the books. And if I'm a prospective owner, I want to know what's really going on there. I want to look and get a clear picture of the financial health of the company. And how could you get a clear picture and have confidence, given that Bank of America, which issued this loan to Dan Snyder without any board approval, is the same bank which prepared the prospectus and is overseeing the sale of the team? How can you trust these guys?
Can't trust anybody. Can't trust Dan Snyder, but we can't trust Daniel Wallach. At Wallach Legal, Conduct Detrimental is the podcast. And I keep saying this: if you like law and you like sports, and the combination of two, there is no better place to go. I appreciate your time. We'll talk again very soon. Best to you and yours, and we'll run it back.
Thank you very much, Adam. Have a great day. Enjoyed the conversation as always.
Always. Daniel Wallach. Appreciate his time. All right.